She gave up her favorite thing in the world to a man she didn't know. He gave her something back she never expected, something that would change her life forever. The toy was a stuffed rabbit. Worn at the ears, patchy at the seams, and once white before years of love turned it to a tired gray. Sarah clutched it every night when she closed her eyes and prayed her dad would come home early from his night shift. She was only 9, but she knew some things lasted longer than others. She thought the rabbit might be one of them. It was Christmas Eve, and snow drifted like feathers in the wind. The streets of downtown Chicago bustled with last-minute shoppers and impatient drivers. Her mother tugged her hand through the crowd, tight and firm, warning her not to fall behind. "Keep close," her mother said, scanning the street corners like she was expecting trouble. That's when Sarah saw him. He sat on the curb with nothing but a blanket of newspaper and a cardboard sign that read, "Cold, hungry, please." He wasn't begging, not really. He just sat there silent, still, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a tattered knit cap. His coat had holes. His gloves were mismatched. And he was shaking. Sarah stopped walking. Her mom kept going. She didn't know why her feet froze. Maybe it was the way the man's eyes flicked up for just a moment, then quickly away. Maybe it was the way everyone else passed him like he was invisible. She pulled the rabbit from her coat. The same rabbit her dad gave her the day he missed her birthday. The same rabbit she refused to wash because it still smelled like home. "Sir," she said softly. He looked up, startled. She held the toy toward him. "You can have it." He blinked like he hadn't heard her right. His hands trembled as he reached out. "This is yours. I want you to have it," she said. "So you're not alone." A single tear traced down his cheek. He clutched the rabbit like it was gold. By then, her mother had turned back, shouting her name. She ran to catch up, glancing once over her shoulder. The man was still there, still staring at the rabbit, still holding it like it was the first warm thing he'd touched in years. That should have been the end of it. But the next morning, Christmas Day, something strange happened. There was a knock at their apartment door. Her mom frowned and opened it cautiously, still in her robe. No one was there. Just a small box wrapped in brown paper, sitting right on their welcome mat. Her name was written in beautiful, shaky handwriting. To Sarah. Inside was something she'd never seen before. Not a toy, not money, but a photograph. It was old, black and white, folded at the corners. And it was a little girl about Sarah's age holding the same stuffed rabbit. And next to her was a man young, smiling, in a soldier's uniform. On the back, in the same handwriting, it read, "She gave me the same gift once. I never forgot. I won't forget you either." Beneath the photo was another folded sheet. A note. It said, "I lost my daughter when she was 9. Cancer took her faster than war ever could. She gave me that rabbit before her final treatment, said it was her best friend and that I'd need someone to keep me warm while I was brave for her. I kept it all these years, until the rain soaked my storage unit and the rats took what the fire didn't. I thought everything was gone. But yesterday, on that street, a little girl with the same eyes gave me that rabbit again. It wasn't the same one, but it felt like it was. I don't have much, but I know what it means to be seen when you think you've disappeared. Thank you for saving me again." Sarah didn't understand the whole letter at first, but she sat with it, and she held the picture in her hands like it was a treasure map. Her mother wiped tears from her cheeks, then kissed the top of her head. "You gave him a second chance," she whispered. The days passed. Weeks. Months. And then, one rainy Thursday in March, as they left the grocery store, Sarah stopped mid-step. There he was, clean-shaven, in a neat brown coat, holding coffee and walking slowly with a cane. He smiled at her. This time he spoke first. "You helped me remember who I was," he said. "Now I help others like me." He pointed to a small shelter van parked nearby. A banner across its side read, "Second Chances Outreach for the Forgotten." "Would you like to come see it?" he asked. She looked up at her mom, who nodded. Inside the van were blankets, toys, soup, gloves, all neatly arranged, all ready to be given. And taped to the inside wall was a photo. Her rabbit, framed behind glass. The words underneath read, "The gift that started it all." Sarah felt something bloom in her chest. Something warm. "You're helping people now," she said. He smiled. "Because of you." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the memory of the van, the framed rabbit, and the quiet pride in the old man's voice playing over and over in her mind. Something inside her had shifted. She didn't quite have the words for it yet, but she knew this was important. At breakfast the next morning, she looked up from her cereal and said, "Mom, can I help him?" Her mother paused, the coffee mug halfway to her lips. "Help who?" "The man with the van. The one I gave the rabbit to." Her mom hesitated. Then slowly, she nodded. "Let's find out how." By the following weekend, Sarah and her mom had joined the weekend volunteer group from Second Chances. The old man whose name they now knew was Walter greeted them with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. His transformation was incredible. Gone was the man curled on the sidewalk with nothing but newspapers for warmth. In his place stood someone sturdy, calm, even a little mischievous. His clothes were simple but clean, his posture straighter. He had a quiet authority, like a man who'd remembered how to stand tall. "Glad you're here," he told Sarah. "We've got a lot of hearts to warm." The van became their second home every Saturday morning. Sarah handed out soup. She sorted gloves and socks into little paper bags. She made cards that said, "You matter," and tucked them into the care kits. Sometimes, she just sat next to someone and listened. Sometimes, they didn't speak at all, just shared the silence. Walter taught her how to see people. Not just look, but see. "That woman there," he'd whisper, pointing to someone sitting on a bench. "She hums to herself because her daughter used to sing when she was scared." "That man," he'd nod toward another, "keeps a plastic spoon in his coat. Says it was the last thing he took from home before he lost it." "They all have stories, kid," Walter said, "even if the world stopped listening." Sarah began to understand. Sometimes kindness wasn't loud. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, patient, like a hand held out in winter, like a rabbit given away on a snowy street corner. Spring melted into summer. Sarah turned 10. Walter turned 72. He still wore the same brown coat, but now it was covered with patches, each one hand-stitched by someone he'd helped. Veterans, mothers, runaways, men who forgot how to speak kindly to themselves, people with nothing left but their names. Walter never took credit. He just smiled and said, "The rabbit did all the work." One morning, as they loaded crates of food into the van, Walter paused, leaned against the side, and clutched his chest. Sarah dropped her juice box. "Walter." He forced a smile. "Just winded. Too much oatmeal." But Sarah wasn't fooled. Neither was her mother, who insisted they call someone. At the hospital, doctors said it was a minor heart episode. Stress, age, fatigue. They kept him overnight for tests. Sarah visited him every day after school. She brought him drawings of the van and the shelter and the people they'd helped. Walter taped each one to the side of his bed like wallpaper. "I don't like this place," he said one afternoon, eyes squinting toward the hallway. "Why not?" "Too many beeping machines. Not enough soul." Sarah giggled. "That's because you're used to the street. Used to the truth," he said. Then his voice softened. "People forget each other too easily. That's the worst kind of loneliness." He looked at her, and for a moment, he wasn't Walter the helper, or Walter the man who changed lives. He was just Walter, someone scared of being forgotten again. "I won't forget you," Sarah whispered. He nodded, blinking quickly. "I know." Walter was released 2 days later, but his energy wasn't the same. He walked slower, talked less, smiled less often. Sarah noticed, but she didn't know what to do. Then one day, she had an idea. At school, during art class, she asked her teacher if she could do a special project. The teacher, who already knew Sarah was different, thoughtful in ways most kids her age weren't, said yes. Sarah gathered crayons, markers, construction paper. She spent recess inside, cutting and gluing and writing by hand. When she was finished, She had 25 small booklets. Each one was titled Walter's Book of Kindness. Inside, each page had a drawing of something Walter had donated: a warm blanket, a bowl of soup, a smile. Under each picture was a sentence. Walter gave Mr. Ray new boots. Walter found Miss Janie's lost dog. Walter told me I matter. Walter saved lives by being kind. Sarah took the booklets and, with her mom's help, delivered them to every person who'd ever received help from Walter. Some cried when they saw them. Some laughed. Some just said, "About time someone wrote that down." One man, Mr. Brinks, a grumpy ex-boxer with a cane and a glass eye, said nothing. He just folded his booklet, put it in his coat pocket, and patted it like it was something sacred. The following Saturday, when Walter stepped into the van, he found it full of people waiting for him. They all held the little booklets. Some wore the gloves he'd given. Some had the blankets he'd found. And when he looked at Sarah, she pointed to the framed rabbit and said, "You gave us a reason to keep going." Walter didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, voice thick, "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me." But life doesn't always follow the storybook. One gray morning in October, the phone rang at Sarah's house before sunrise. It was the hospital. Walter had passed away in his sleep. Peaceful. No pain. Sarah didn't believe it at first. She ran to the window, half expecting to see the van parked below, the horn honking, Walter waving like always. But there was only quiet. She didn't cry at first, not until she saw the rabbit, still in its frame, still watching. She curled into her mother's arms and sobbed so hard her ribs ached. The funeral was small, but the church was full. People from the street, volunteers, nurses, kids, strangers. All of them had a Walter story. Some stood up to speak. Some left flowers. One man left his own shoes. Sarah stood too. She held one of her booklets and read the last page aloud. Walter reminded the world that one kind act can echo forever. Weeks later, on what would have been Walter's 73rd birthday, Sarah stood on the same street corner where she first met him. She had a new rabbit. White. Soft. Brand new. She saw a woman sitting alone with a baby in her lap and tears on her cheeks. Sarah walked over, held out the rabbit. "Here," she said. The woman blinked. "Are you sure?" Sarah nodded. "So you're not alone." The cycle had begun again. And this time, it wouldn't stop. Because kindness never really does. The seasons rolled forward without apology. Winter returned, heavy and unapologetic, coating the streets in white silence. But for Sarah, everything had changed. Walter was gone. Yet somehow, his presence felt stronger than ever. The framed rabbit still hung in the van, but now beside it was a photo of Walter smiling, arms folded, standing proudly in front of the shelter van as if guarding something sacred. Underneath the photo, Sarah's mom had added a quote from one of Walter's old notebook pages. "The world forgets people who fall, but never those who rise again." The shelter van no longer belonged to Walter. It now belonged to Sarah. At first, people were skeptical. What could a 10-year-old do? But then they saw her show up every Saturday, just like he did. Saw her organize kits, fold blankets, tape handwritten notes inside each care bag. Heard her speak to strangers like they were family. Heard her say things Walter once said. "You matter. You're still here, and that's enough. You are not invisible." And slowly, they started calling her Little Walter. She didn't mind. In fact, she wore it like a badge. One day, while sorting donations inside the van, Sarah found something tucked behind a loose panel. A notebook. Faded leather cover. Water-damaged edges. Pages full of scribbles, dates, names. It was Walter's. Her heart jumped. She flipped it open to the first page. "If something happens to me, give this to someone who still believes in people." That was all the permission she needed. The pages were full of stories. People Walter had met. Things they'd said. Things he'd done for them, often quietly, often with no credit. One entry read, "December 12th, man in alley. Vietnam vet. Gave him gloves. Listens when I tell him he still has value. Must remember his name. Anthony. Another. April 3rd girl at the bus stop. Gave her the last sandwich. She gave me a smile that lasted all week. And another. August 7th gave away my coat. Again. Note to self. Stop doing that in summer. Sarah laughed at that last one. She read every page, sometimes out loud to her mom, sometimes just to the air, hoping Walter could still hear. By the time Sarah turned 11, something extraordinary had begun to happen. People started joining her, not just to help but to tell their own stories. One woman, Miss Carla, came every Saturday to give haircuts outside the van. She had been homeless for 6 years. Walter once gave her a winter coat. He made me feel human again, she said. A man named Elijah who once lived under the overpass started driving the van. Walter saved my life when he gave me socks and didn't ask for anything back, he explained. I'll never forget that. There was even a teacher, Mr. Denny, who brought his class once a month to volunteer. He said Sarah's work was more meaningful than anything in their textbooks. But not everyone supported her. One afternoon, a city officer approached while she was giving out warm tea in the park. You can't run this here without a permit, he said. Sarah, nervous but firm, looked him in the eye. I'm not running anything. I'm helping. The officer looked at the people in line. Cold, thin, tired. Then he looked back at Sarah. He sighed. Just be careful, okay? He walked away without another word. The news started to spread. Not through newspapers or big media, but by whispers, by kindness, by people who were helped and who then helped others. One day, a man in a pressed suit stepped into the van. He looked completely out of place among the crates and coats. You're the girl who runs this? He asked. Sarah looked up from a box of canned soup. Yes. He knelt beside her, resting one hand on the rabbit's frame. My brother was one of Walter's friends. He passed last year, but he talked about this van like it was a chapel. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check. $10,000. No strings, he said. Just keep doing what you're doing. Sarah stared at it. Are you sure? I'm positive, the man replied. This is the first thing I've done in years that actually feels right. With the money, they bought a second van. Labeled it Walter's Way. They visited new neighborhoods, different corners, more forgotten alleys. And in each one, someone seemed to say, I remember him. Sarah started a wall of notes in the back of the original van. People would write their memories of Walter, their thanks, their hopes. It was called the Wall of Second Chances. One night, Sarah stood inside the van alone, flashlight in hand, reading the notes. One in particular stopped her. It said, Walter found me under a bridge. I was ready to end everything. He sat with me for hours and never once looked away. I'm alive because someone saw me. Now I help him see others. It wasn't signed. She traced the letters with her finger. I hope I can do that too, she whispered. But even heroes get tired. By the end of that winter, Sarah had caught pneumonia from one too many cold nights. She was hospitalized for a week. Her fever was high, her chest tight, and for the first time since Walter's funeral, she felt afraid. Not of dying, but of disappearing, of all of it fading without her. On her third night in the hospital, a woman entered the room. Mid-40s. Kind face. She wore a brown coat. Sarah thought it looked familiar. The woman sat beside her and said nothing for a long moment. Then she pulled something from her bag. The same rabbit. The original one. Framed. Intact. Returned. My son found this at a thrift store, she said. He said it made him cry. I asked where he got it, and he pointed me to your van. I knew I had to come. Sarah blinked, confused. But the rabbit was in the van. The woman smiled. There's more than one now. She leaned closer. I was one of the first people Walter ever helped. I was pregnant, lost, cold. He gave me hope, gave me a scarf, told me I'd survive. She took Sarah's hand gently. I did. Then she left. Sarah lay there, staring at the rabbit in her lap. And she cried. For Walter. For the people he saved. For the people she would still save. The next morning, She woke up feeling better. Not healed, but stronger. More certain than ever that Walter's legacy wasn't a chapter. It was a beginning. Spring arrived not with a whisper, but a song. The city thawed. Trees budded with cautious hope. The cold corners of sidewalks became warmer spaces where people gathered, not just to survive but to connect. Sarah had recovered fully. Her hair was longer now. Her eyes, older somehow. The world had chipped at her childhood in ways no textbook could explain, but it had also built her into something stronger. Something that looked a lot like Walter. The vans both of them ran 5 days a week now. Sarah, still just a girl, wasn't alone. Not anymore. A woman named Gloria handled supplies. A college student named Milo managed routes and safety. A team of 6 rotating volunteers showed up daily, no matter the weather. And every morning, before they started, Sarah placed her hand gently on the framed rabbit in van 1 and whispered, "Let's go see them." She never said help them. She always said, see them, just like Walter taught her. One Thursday morning, something unusual happened. An older man, well-dressed and holding a leather folder, approached the van while they were serving hot breakfast in the park. "Are you Sarah?" he asked. She nodded, wiping syrup from her sleeve. "My name's Leonard Graves. I'm a writer, and I'd like to tell your story." Sarah hesitated. "Why mine?" The man opened his folder, revealing newspaper clippings, photos of Walter, and handwritten letters. "Because your story is already changing other people's stories. People just don't know it yet." Sarah looked to her mom, who had quietly walked up behind her. Her mom gave a gentle nod. "Okay," Sarah said, "but you have to start with him." "With Walter?" Leonard smiled. "I already did." The article went viral within days. The girl who carried a rabbit and changed a city. People donated. Blankets, coats, books, meals, money. But more than anything, they sent letters. Hundreds. From veterans. From widows. From kids. From shelters and places Sarah had never heard of. Each one echoed the same truth. "You reminded us to care again." That summer, something extraordinary happened. The city council, moved by the story and the growing impact of Walter's Way, invited Sarah to speak at a community action summit. She stood behind a microphone in a dress too big for her, and with trembling fingers holding a picture of Walter. She looked out at the crowd, officials, teachers, business leaders, families, and cleared her throat. "My name is Sarah," she began. "I'm not here because I'm special. I'm here because someone saw me." She held up the photo. "This is Walter. I gave him my rabbit because he looked cold. He gave me something back that I'll never stop sharing." The hall was silent. Sometimes people don't need you to fix their life. Sometimes they just need you to believe they still have one. Applause filled the room. But Sarah wasn't smiling for praise. She was smiling for Walter. For what came next. 1 month later, the city gave Walter's Way permanent nonprofit status. No more fighting for permits. No more risk of shutdown. Now it was official. They got a small headquarters and old renovated bus garage where volunteers could gather and rest. Sarah had her own desk. On it, the framed rabbit, still watching. But more important than any building were the lives changing around them. There was Tanya, who used to sleep in a tent behind the train station. Now she ran the mobile library van for homeless kids. There was Emmett, a former addict who found stability through the food program. He became the group's accountant. There was Julie, age 12, who once received a care kit on a snow day and now created handmade kindness kits for women in crisis. And there were the dozens of children, too many to name, who brought toys to give away, like Sarah did. The story rippled. It rippled across streets, across schools, across hearts. And then, one autumn morning, a letter arrived. There was no return address. It simply read, "I knew Walter once. In a different life. He saved me, too. I heard about what you're doing. I've been waiting years to believe again. Thank you for making me remember. P.S. The rabbit always comes back where it belongs." Inside was a soft white plush rabbit. New. Identical to the one Sarah gave away years ago. Sarah clutched it to her chest and closed her eyes. Years passed. Sarah grew. But she never stopped returning to that street corner every Christmas Eve, where the snow always fell the same, and the air always held a memory. She'd bring soup. She'd bring toys. And every year, she'd leave a rabbit on the bench wrapped in cloth, with a card that simply read, "You are not alone." Sometimes it was taken. Sometimes it was left untouched. But always someone noticed. Always someone remembered. On Sarah's 18th birthday, she stood at the podium of a large community auditorium. Hundreds gathered. Walter's Way now had 5 vans, a staff of over 30, and outreach in 2 neighboring cities. She didn't bring notes this time, just a photograph. The original. The girl and the soldier. The rabbit between them. "I never met the girl in this photo," she said, "but I think about her every day." She paused. Walter never forgot her, and I will never forget him. Then she smiled. "We don't need to be famous, or rich, or powerful. We just need to be present." She held up the rabbit. Sometimes a gift this small can build a world. Later that night, in the quiet of her small office, Sarah sat alone. The lights were low. The city hummed outside. She opened Walter's old notebook. It was worn, its pages thin with age. At the back, one final page remained blank until now. She picked up her pen and began to write. December 24th, boy with no shoes. Gave him a rabbit. He smiled. Said it was the first soft thing he's held in years. His name was Joseph. I think I'll see him again. She smiled, signed her name underneath. SM. And gently closed the book. Outside, snow began to fall. Soft. Steady. Like memories that never fade. And on a bench near the corner of 9th and Wallace, a boy found a rabbit wrapped in cloth. He picked it up, confused. Read the note. Held it close. And smiled. The end.